I, 28F, never thought I'd be posting here, but I need advice about my situation. I'm Kate, and I've been married to Dan, 32M, for 3 years. Everything was perfect until my sister-in-law Amy moved in with us 4 months ago. Amy is my brother Mike's widow. Mike passed away in a car accident last year, and when Amy found out she was pregnant 2 months after his death, she was devastated. The baby wasn't Mike's since they had been trying unsuccessfully for years. Amy was 5 months pregnant when she showed up at our doorstep crying. She confessed that the baby was from a brief relationship she had while grieving Mike. When the guy found out about the pregnancy, he completely disappeared. Amy had been managing on her own but lost her job due to pregnancy complications and couldn't afford her apartment anymore. Dan immediately offered to let her stay with us without even discussing it with me. I understand she's family and was in a desperate situation. She's my dead brother's wife after all, but I wish he had talked to me first. It's our house that we bought together last year, and such a big decision should have been made together. Some background about Amy: she and Mike were high school sweethearts and got married right after college. Mike was my older brother and we were very close. When he died, it devastated our entire family. Amy took it especially hard since they had been trying to have a baby for years with no success. After Mike's death, she distanced herself from our family for a while, which I understood. She needed space to grieve. At first, things were okay when Amy moved in. She kept to herself and I tried my best to make her feel welcome. I made sure she had everything she needed and helped her set up in our guest room. But then things started changing. Dan began spending all his free time with Amy. If he wasn't at work, he was helping her set up the nursery in our spare room, going shopping for baby stuff, or staying up late talking to her. I started feeling like an outsider in my own home. Many nights I went to bed alone while they stayed up talking about the baby and Mike. What makes this situation harder is that Dan and I have been trying for a baby ourselves for the past year with no luck. We've been to several doctors but it just hasn't happened yet. Seeing Amy pregnant and having Dan so excited about her baby while we're struggling has been really difficult. About a month ago, I overheard a conversation between Amy and Dan that made my stomach drop. Amy was asking Dan to be more than just an uncle to her baby. She wanted him to be the legal father since the biological father wasn't in the picture. She said the baby needed a father figure, and since Dan was Mike's best friend, it made sense to her. The worst part was that Dan didn't immediately say no. He actually seemed to be considering it. That night, after Amy went to bed, I confronted Dan. I told him that while I supported helping Amy, becoming her baby's legal father was crossing a line. I reminded him about our own struggles to conceive and how it felt like a betrayal that he would consider parenting a child with my sister-in-law instead of focusing on our own family. Dan got extremely defensive. He said I was being insensitive to Amy's situation and that Mike would have wanted us to help her. He brought up how Mike had been his best friend since college and how he promised him he'd always look out for Amy. We got into a huge fight that ended with him sleeping on the couch. Things have been tense since then. Amy has started taking over more of our house. She completely took over the guest room for the nursery, which I understood, but then she started moving her things into our bedroom closet, saying she needed more space for baby clothes. She rearranged our living room to make room for baby equipment and even moved some of my decorative pieces to the basement without asking. When I complained to Dan about Amy moving my things without permission, he said I was being petty and that family should come first. He made me feel like I was being unreasonable for wanting to maintain some boundaries in my own home. Last week, things got even stranger. I left work early because I wasn't feeling well and found Amy in our home office going through our financial documents. She quickly put everything away when she saw me, but I'm certain she was looking at our savings account information. When I asked her about it, she got flustered and claimed she was just trying to figure out her own budget. When I told Dan about it, he completely dismissed my concerns and said I was being paranoid. The dynamics in our house have become unbearable. Amy acts like she's the lady of the house now, making decisions about our space without consulting me. Dan backs her up on everything and makes me feel like I'm the problem. When I try to talk to him about how I'm feeling, he either gets defensive or accuses me of not being supportive enough of my brother's widow. I feel like I'm going crazy. Dan keeps saying I'm being dramatic, but something feels really off about this whole situation. Amy is due in 2 months and I don't know how much more I can take. I love my husband, but I feel like he's choosing my sister-in-law over our marriage. Every time I try to establish boundaries, I'm made to feel like I'm being selfish or unreasonable. How do I handle this? Am I overreacting? Should I just accept that this is how things are going to be now? I don't want to be insensitive to Amy's situation, but I also don't want to live feeling like a third wheel in my own marriage. Update 1 first, thank you everyone for your support and advice on my original post. A lot has happened in the past 2 weeks, and I needed time to process everything before updating. After reading suggestions about checking our finances, I decided to look deeper into our accounts since Amy's snooping had made me suspicious. Dan and I have always had separate accounts for personal spending, but we maintain a joint savings account for our future family. What I discovered made me sick to my stomach. Dan had withdrawn $25,000 from our joint savings account without telling me. This was money we'd been saving for over 2 years, specifically set aside for when we finally had a baby. We had both agreed never to touch it without discussing first. When I confronted Dan about the withdrawal, he initially tried to deflect. But after I showed him the bank statement, he admitted he had given the money to Amy to help her get started with the baby. He claimed she needed it for medical bills and baby supplies since she wasn't working. He also mentioned something about wanting to honor Mike's memory by taking care of his wife. I was absolutely furious. This wasn't a small amount, it was a huge chunk of our savings that we'd worked hard to build together. Dan tried to justify it by saying Amy needed it more right now since she was already pregnant and alone. He said he had been planning to tell me eventually but knew I would overreact. I told him this wasn't just about the money, it was about trust and respect. We're supposed to be partners, making decisions together. Instead, he treated me like my opinion didn't matter when it came to Amy. The fight that followed was explosive. Amy heard everything and came downstairs crying, saying she never meant to cause problems. That's when things got even worse. In the middle of her tearful apology, Amy revealed that she and Dan had already filed paperwork for him to become her baby's legal guardian. They had been planning this for weeks behind my back. According to Amy, they started the process right after that conversation I overheard. They didn't tell me because they knew I would try to stop it. Amy tried to explain that her baby needed a father figure, and since Dan was Mike's best friend, it made sense to her. She even had the nerve to say that Mike would have wanted this. I felt completely betrayed. Not only had my husband given away our savings without telling me, but he had also legally committed to raising another child without discussing it with his wife. Even worse, this was with my dead brother's widow. It felt like they were trying to create some twisted replacement family. Dan tried to defend their actions, saying they knew I would be difficult about it so they decided to handle it quietly. He actually said that since it was his name on the paperwork, not mine, he didn't need my permission. When I reminded him that we were married and this would affect our entire family, he said I was being selfish and disrespecting Mike's memory. I packed a bag and went to stay with my parents. I needed space to think and process everything. Dan has been calling and texting constantly, but not to apologize. Instead, he's saying I'm abandoning Amy when she needs family most. He keeps bringing up Mike, saying he would be disappointed in how I'm acting. My parents are shocked by Dan's behavior. They love Amy but even they think this has gone too far. My mom tried talking to Amy, but Amy just cried about how she needs support right now and how Dan is the only one who understands her. I'm still at my parents' house. The trust in my marriage feels completely broken. Dan has shown me that he will always put Amy first, even if it means betraying me. He's made huge, life-altering decisions without consulting me twice now, and I'm scared to think about what else they might be planning together. Some family members have started reaching out, telling me I'm being too harsh and that we need to support Amy during this time. They keep bringing up Mike and how he would have wanted us to help her. But what about my needs? What about the family Dan and I were trying to build? I've scheduled an appointment with a lawyer next week to understand my options. I'm not saying I want a divorce, but I need to know where I stand legally after everything that's happened. Dan still doesn't know about the lawyer. I've learned from his example about keeping certain things to myself. Update 2: things have gotten even more complicated since my last update. While staying at my parents' house these past weeks, I noticed my period was late. Between all the stress and chaos, I hadn't been tracking it properly. I took multiple pregnancy tests, they all came back positive. My doctor confirmed I'm about 8 weeks along. I should be overjoyed. This is what Dan and I had been trying for over a year to achieve. But instead of feeling happy, I just feel lost. All I could think about was how Dan had already committed to being a father to Amy's baby. He took our savings, filed legal paperwork, and basically created a whole new family unit with my brother's widow without me. Amy had her baby last week, a little girl. Dan has barely left the hospital since she went into labor. He's been posting constant updates on social media, calling himself her dad and talking about how amazing it feels to finally be a father. Each post feels like a knife in my heart, especially now that I'm carrying his actual child. I've watched from afar through social media as he's completely thrown himself into this role. He took 2 weeks off work to help Amy settle in with the baby. He's posting pictures of himself feeding the baby, changing diapers, and talking about sleepless nights like he's the actual father. He even wrote a long post about how this baby is a gift from Mike and how he'll raise her like his own. Yesterday, I finally told Dan about my pregnancy. I asked him to meet me at a coffee shop because I didn't want to have this conversation at our house with Amy there. His reaction wasn't what I expected at all. Instead of being happy, he seemed almost annoyed by the news. He said the timing was terrible and that he needed to focus on Amy and the baby right now. When I reminded him that I was carrying his actual child, he got angry. He said both babies were equally his responsibility now and that I was being selfish for trying to make him choose. He actually suggested I move back home so we could all raise both babies together as one big happy family. I sat there stunned as he laid out his plan. He thought I could move back in, help Amy with her baby while I'm pregnant, and then we could all co-parent both children together. When I told him this arrangement was inappropriate and disrespectful to Mike's memory, he accused me of being jealous and unsupportive. The final straw came when he said he couldn't promise to be there for my prenatal appointments because he had already committed to helping Amy with the baby's checkups and he couldn't let her down. That's when I realized nothing was going to change. Dan would always put Amy and her baby first, even above his own child. I made my decision right there in that coffee shop. I told him I wanted a divorce. He tried to argue that I was being hormonal and irrational, that I wasn't thinking about what's best for our baby. He even said Mike would be ashamed of how I was treating his widow. When I got back to my parents' house, I had several angry messages from Amy. Apparently, Dan had told her everything and she was upset that I was trying to ruin their happiness with my pregnancy. She actually suggested that I got pregnant on purpose to compete with her. The irony of her accusing me of trying to trap Dan when she's the one who manipulated him into being her baby's father wasn't lost on me. I've blocked both of them on everything now. I can't deal with their twisted version of reality anymore. I've already spoken to a divorce lawyer and we're preparing to file the paperwork. My parents have been my rock through all of this. Even my extended family, who initially told me to be more understanding, are now seeing how messed up this situation has become. I have my first proper prenatal appointment next week. My mom is coming with me for support. It's not how I imagined my first pregnancy would go, but I know I'm making the right choice for myself and my baby. Update 3: The divorce papers have been filed and the initial proceedings are underway. I'm living with my parents permanently now and focusing on my pregnancy. I'm 5 months along and found out I'm having a boy. My mom came with me to the anatomy scan and we both cried when we saw his little face on the screen. It was a bittersweet moment. I wished Mike could have been there to see he was getting a nephew. Dan barely contested the divorce, he was too busy helping Amy with her baby. When my lawyer sent over the paperwork, he signed everything without much pushback. The only thing he fought for was visitation rights to our son after he's born. I agreed to supervised visits, but only if he comes to our location. I'm not bringing my child anywhere near the weird family dynamic he's created with Amy. I found out through mutual friends that Dan and Amy are now officially co-parenting her daughter. They're living together in our old house, and Dan has fully taken on the role of father. He's even giving the baby his last name and is listed as the father on her birth certificate. Some of our friends think I gave up too easily, but they haven't seen how deep this dysfunction goes. The most painful part was dealing with extended family. Most of them initially sided with Amy, saying she needed support after losing Mike. But after seeing how Dan and Amy have been acting, posting constant photos together with the baby, calling themselves a family, even they're starting to feel uncomfortable. My uncle actually told me that Mike would be rolling in his grave if he saw how his best friend and widow were behaving. Last week, Amy had the nerve to call me. She said I was being cruel by taking Dan's son away from him and that Mike would have wanted our children to grow up together as siblings. I hung up without responding. The audacity of her using my dead brother's name to justify her actions made me physically sick. I've decided to move to another state where my aunt lives. She has a small rental property that I can use until I get back on my feet. I don't want my son growing up confused about why his father is raising another baby as his own while treating him like a part-time obligation. When I told Dan about the move, he got angry and threatened to fight for custody. My lawyer assured me he doesn't have much of a case, especially given how he's prioritized Amy's baby over his own child. Still, I documented everything: the money he took, the legal guardianship he filed without telling me, and all his social media posts calling himself Amy's baby's father. Dan's parents finally reached out last week. They apologized for not seeing the situation clearly sooner. His mom said she was ashamed of how Dan had handled everything and that she understood why I had to leave. It was validating to hear, but it doesn't change anything. I'm due in 3 months and honestly, I'm looking forward to my fresh start. My aunt has been amazing, already helping me set up the nursery and supporting my decision to leave. My parents plan to visit often after the baby comes. Sometimes I miss the life I thought I would have. I never imagined I'd be a single mom, or that my marriage would end because my husband chose to play house with my brother's widow. But I know I deserve better than being second choice in my own marriage, and more importantly, my son deserves better than a father who prioritizes another child over him. To everyone who supported me through this whole mess, thank you. Your comments and messages helped me stay strong when I doubted myself. I'm starting a new chapter of my life, and while it's not what I planned, I know it's the right choice for me and my baby.